Hi, good afternoon. This is Claudia's podcast. Welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing Dr. Bettina's Love. Bettina Love's book, We Want to Do More Than Survive. We Want to Thrive. Abolitionist Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom. A little bit about the author. Dr. Bettina Love is an educator of educators. She started off playing basketball, and when she was done with her undergrad, she was asked by her coach to maybe think about getting a master's. And she thought, well, I like working with kids. So she got into education. And part of her program in her master's was meeting with professors and talking to them about books that she was reading. And this inspired her to go on and get a PhD because her professors were like, it looks like you like to talk, you like to discuss books, and maybe a PhD would be a good fit for you. So she did. She went on to pursue a PhD at Teachers College in Columbia University, and then she wrote a book. She became a professor, and she teaches now at University of Georgia, and she has brought several books, and one of which we're discussing today is We Want to Do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom. So from the get-go, the title is kind of impressive. It tells us, um, it may be shocking to some to think about abolition. I know. When I think about abolition, I think about enslaving people, and we think about the history of that. It right away brings to mind what does education have to do with abolition, right? So we know that education has had, particularly for people of color, has been maybe not the most welcoming to all, the most just to all. And the emphasis on education now is moving more towards inclusivity, creating equity. And this applies not only to people who are Black, but also people who have um, other um, identities that may not fit within the mainstream. So this may include people who weren't born in the country, who aren't English speakers, who um, live in poverty or are homeless, or people with different abilities. And it's important to think about it because the classrooms that we're going into are ever so much more diverse than they used to be years ago. And some of we think about the when we think about the lessons that we've been learning in class, the TPEs, teacher preparation um, requirements are that we find ways to connect with our students, because in finding ways to connect um, has to do with getting to know them, getting to know where they come from, who are they, how do they identify, and in knowing these things, we can find ways to engage our students' attention in the classroom. So this is important because um, not everybody comes to school with the same formation that we do, right? So it's important to think about how who are we, um, and by saying who are we, I mean think about our own identity within the classroom and outside of the classroom. Who what makes us up, and when we go into the classroom, are we going in there thinking that everything should be this from the perspective that everything should reflect our own experience, or can we step outside of our own identity and think about um, what other people's experiences may be in the classroom? And I think knowing this and being able to identify that within ourselves and others can make us more effective teachers in reaching everybody in our classroom. So I think that's why this book is important. And it's important because it's about making social change. that means being agents of change is one of the words they use, and creating spaces in our classroom that become home spaces for our students where they feel comfortable being who they are and bringing the joy that they are um, in and out of the room, so that none of their identities have to be barred from the classroom, because the more that we know them, the more that we will be able to reach them when we're teaching students science, math, literature, whatever it is that we decide to teach in our class, that we're mandated to teach rather. Um, so that's why I think it's book is important, because we have um, Dr. Love speaks of a carceral state that has been created, and by carceral state is my understanding of this is that it is making schools pipelines for prisons for certain students in class and schools. And this has been done historically through punitive measures of discipline, not really teaching kids how to what is what we want from them, but rather finding ways to exclude them from education, things like expulsions and things like that, create this problem. Because I don't know if you guys remember, you might not, because this is probably a little bit farther back than you guys, but um, during the Clinton administration, there was the three strikes laws, and things like truancy can get people into problems if they were reported to the police, and that minor offense could get somebody involved in the justice system. And once a kid gets into the justice system, especially with laws, draconic laws like three strikes and you're out, that could be simple things that could be fixed within the school environment, could actually lead to further problems for somebody's life and complicate them. And so Dr. Love really speaks of that carceral state, and how our jails are populated by many more people of color than white people, and that she makes the argument that this has been done. Um, this has been done deliberately through the laws and um, policies that have been pushed. And so she really advocates in her book, I think, more than speaking about the problems, because I think to some degree, anyone who's going into education is aware of some of the problems just through their own experience in being a student. And because it could be a trigger for some, I will not go into the details of all the problems that people of color have faced in schools. But it's something to reflect on if you have the time, and if you can get into the book, I recommend it. However, the more important, and not that the, however, it is important to think about the solutions that she proposes. And one of the ways that we can prevent kids from going into the juvenile system and the justice system is by maybe engaging in restorative practices, like the video we watched in class, where um, teacher and student were confronted and they were able to look at each other like people, and they were going through struggles, and see each other, humanize each other, and really express to the other what were their needs and how could they be met through their agreements that they made. Um, and I think interventions like that really make a difference in the students' experience in classrooms, because they get to be heard, they get to speak their mind, and also teachers, because it's a stressful situation for teachers to be in, where we have disruption in the class. But how do you know what's causing the disruption if you're not able to talk to the students? So I think those practices, are part of what Dr. Love recommends in trying to avoid this. Other things she recommends is looking at civic engagement and teaching children about how to be the advocates that they can be for themselves in a schooling system. So this was a practice. We'll see how it sounds.